Constitution's open to Article 3. Article 3 is the judicial branch of government, and their job is to make laws, right? What do you mean no?
No.
You should know
What's
that.
their law? What's their job?
They make the laws.
Interpret the laws. It cannot be making laws. All right, whose job is it to make laws? Congress's job. All right. Remember, we said it's kind of interesting to be talking about the Supreme Court right now, which is the top of the judicial branch, because of what's going on in our country, right? There's an opening. So President Trump followed the Constitution and made an appointment to fill that opening. We looked at her yesterday. That's Amy Coney Barrett. And yesterday, her confirmation hearing started. And it's going on still today. Yesterday, she made her opening statement. Today, she's getting questioned by the senators on the committee. And it'll go on at least the rest of this week, maybe longer. And eventually, it'll go to the whole Senate and they'll get to vote on her. Because even though the president gets to pick the name, he doesn't just get to put somebody on the court. The Senate gets the final say. They don't get to pick the person. They just get to approve or not approve the president's pick. So that'll be coming up probably the end of this month. But in the meantime, yesterday, it's kind of interesting because Amy Coney Barrett said in her opening statement the same thing we said in class yesterday. She said, it is not the job of the Supreme Court to make laws. She said, she even told the Senate, she said, that's your job. Because they're the legislative branch, right? She told them, that's your job. And she said, when you make bad laws, don't expect us in the court to fix it. That's not our job. Our job is just to interpret the law the way it is written. Not whether we like it or not whether we think it's a good law or not, but just to interpret it the way you wrote it. If you wrote a messed up law, well then you fix it. Don't expect us to do it. Not what we're supposed to do. Right? And remember we said that the reason everybody's so upset is because there really is two kinds of judges. There's judges that understand their job is to interpret, follow the law. But then remember we put up over here, there's also judges that they overstep their powers and they try to make laws and change laws according to what they think it should be. But that's not their job, and the danger of that is obvious, and she pointed that out in her opening statement yesterday. The danger of that is tyranny, because the other two branches are political branches. That's how she called it. And they are, right? The Congress and the President are political branches of government. That means they're Republicans and Democrats, and we elect them. That's politics, right? We elect them. And if they make bad laws, well, we have a recourse. Next election, we can elect somebody that we like better to fix that dumb law they made, right? But when we have judges that are making laws, that's not a political branch. We have no recourse. All right, we can't vote them out. And that's tyranny. All right, so how many judges on the court? 9. Been that way for 150, 200 years, whatever. 9 judges on the court. How do they get there?
So the president picks them, and then Congress has to give that person like the okay.
Not all Congress. What part of Congress?
Senate.
The Senate. All right, so that's exactly right. The president picks the person, and then the Senate gets the final say, yes or no. That's all according to the Constitution. That's cool because we're actually going through that process right now. And how long do they get to stay on the court?
As long as they want, as long as they do it responsibly.
So exactly right. It's a lifetime appointment. All right, so that right there, everything we've said should tell us how important it is that who's on the court. Who's on the court really matters. It has major impact on our everyday lives as Americans. And it's going to impact you and your children and your grandchildren, right? Because their decisions are final. It's settled. So who's on the court really matters. Because we don't want people on the court that are going to overstep their constitutional bounds and start making up laws because we have no recourse. We want people on the court that are gonna follow and interpret the law as it's written. That's their job. So again, it matters who's on that court. Sorry about that. Mr. Wrench. Sending me a text. Which leads me to the next discussion about the Supreme Court. Normally, we wouldn't talk about this in class, but because there's things going on in our country, this is a great time to talk about a current event. There are, just so you know, generally speaking, Republicans like judges who interpret the law. Because Republicans, what they stand for is the rule of law. Alright, so they like judges that interpret the law. Whether we like the way they interpret it or not, as long as they're following the way the law's written, we're good with that. If the law's dumb, well then it's up to Congress to change it, not the court. We get that as Republicans. Democrats tend to like judges who change and make laws. And there's a reason for that, because historically, many Democrat ideas aren't all that popular. And they can't pass those laws in Congress because they can't get enough support. And they can't pass those laws at the ballot box because Americans oppose those crazy ideas. So for my lifetime, for a generation, they've been using the courts to get unpopular ideas turned into laws. Things they couldn't do in Congress, things they couldn't do on elections, they get the court to do for them. And just obvious examples of that are abortion, and recently, gay marriage has been legalized. Not by Congress, not by elections, by the Supreme Court, just a few years ago, which at the time was a very unpopular idea. Alright, so they've been depending on that, and remember what I told you yesterday, is that balance of the court, my whole lifetime, leaned toward the side of making laws. And only recently, and especially with Amy Coney Barrett, if she indeed does fill that seat, replaced a real Ruth Bader Ginsburg make laws with an Amy Coney Barrett interpret the laws. That shifts the balance to a 5-4, maybe 6-3, right? Supreme Court that interprets laws. Now, obviously, that means many Democrats, not all, but many Democrats are upset by that. They don't like that shift of balance. So some Democrats are threatening, if they win the election, to pack the Supreme Court. But just so you know what packing the court means adding justices to the Supreme Court. Instead of 9, add more. Alright, so in order to do that, the Democrats would have to be in power, right? And that could happen in 21 days. We have an election. It's very possible that Joe Biden becomes president. In fact, he's leading big in the polls. It's very possible that the House of Representatives stays under the control of the Democrats like they have now. And it's also very possible, in fact likely, that the Democrats take control of the Senate. And then they would have the White House, the House, and the Senate. And there'd be nothing to stop them from passing laws, right? And they could pass a law to add justices to the Supreme Court and negate that current 6-3 majority toward the interpret law side. They're saying they might want to add as many as 6 justices, make it 15. And of course they would add 6 judges that like to make laws. Could that happen? It could happen. If they were to do that, add 6 justices, pack the court, would that be unconstitutional? Well, not exactly, because the Constitution does not say anywhere that there has to be 9 judges. In fact, what it does say is that Congress gets to determine the number. And in that case, Congress would have determined the number, so that part of it would be constitutional, right? No harm, no foul. Alright, but in another way, it would be unconstitutional because the whole point of having 3 branches is a separation of powers and checks and balances. Three separate but equal powers. One to make the law, one to enforce the law, one to interpret the law. By making the Supreme Court packed like that, you know what that would do? That would make that a political branch too, wouldn't it? See, the Congress and the President, like Amy Coney Barrett said yesterday, are already political branches of government. We elect them. But by packing the court, now we turn the Supreme Court, the only branch that's not about Republicans and Democrats, the only branch that isn't somebody we elect, it would turn it into a political branch too. Because eventually, in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, whenever, if Republicans would ever get control of everything, then they might want to pack it the other way. And they wouldn't be able to add just 6, because that would make it equal. So they might have to add 10. Now we'd have 25 judges. And then years after that, when Democrats would get control again, well, they wouldn't be able to add just 10, because that would make it equal. So they'd have to add 20. So now we'd have up to 45 judges. And then when would that stop, right? Every 10, whatever years, when a different party takes over. It's just another political branch of government, right? So, while by the letter of the Constitution, packing the court wouldn't necessarily be unconstitutional, because it doesn't say you have to have 9. By the spirit of the Constitution, the whole point of the separation of powers, it would be unconstitutional. So just so you know, that's one of the big discussions going on in our country. What makes it even more interesting is Joe Biden, running for president, refuses to answer whether he's in favor of court packing. President Trump asked him at the debate, and he refused to answer. He said, "Shut up, man." All right. Kamala Harris was asked in her debate. She refused to answer. Joe Biden has been asked by reporters every single day since the debate whether he's in favor of court packing. He still has not answered. In fact, about 3 days ago, he said, "You'll find out after the election." He even said, "You'll find out 1 minute after the election what I think about court packing." A little late, isn't it? Don't the voters have a right to know what he thinks? Yeah, well, he was asked that exact question yesterday. A reporter said, "Well, don't you think voters have a right to know what you think about that? Because that's a pretty big deal, packing the court. Don't you think voters have a right to know?" His answer, "No, they don't have a right to know." Now, in my opinion, of course I can't read his mind, but in my opinion, there's only one possible reason why he won't answer the question, because he does support it, but he knows it's not a popular idea. So he doesn't want to admit that he supports it. I could be wrong, but that's my best guess. By not answering it, he's actually answering it. Any questions on the Supreme Court, Article 3? A lot of stuff going on with that in the news right now. All right, Article 4 of the Constitution. Now, today we're going to cover Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7. Sounds like a lot, but when you look at them, all combined, they're all shorter than Article 1. Combined, they're shorter. So it won't take us that long. We'll get through them today. I know you haven't read it yet. That will be tonight's assignment, but we're going to go ahead and discuss them. When I don't expect you to know everything about them yet, because you haven't read it yet. All right, but Article 4, look what it's about, the states and the federal government. So quick review, we already know this, we have a federal system. I hope you remember that means we have different levels of government, right? We have the United States government, we call that the national government. We sometimes call that the central government. That is also sometimes called the federal government. They all mean the same thing. U.S. government, national government, central government, federal government, it all means the same thing. Washington, D.C. That's what we've been learning about, right? Our national government. The Congress, the President, the Supreme Court. It's all outlined in the United States Constitution. That's what we're learning. And of course, they make laws in all 50 states, and everybody in those states has to follow those laws. Got it. That's the national government. But I think you also know there's also 50 different state governments, aren't there? Hey, you know what we could have done when we became a country? We could have gotten out an eraser and erased all the state boundaries. But then, of course, the name of our country wouldn't be the United States, would it? It would just be what? America. We could have done that, but we didn't want to do that. We like having little mini governments under the national governments. We like having states, because that way, each state gets to do things their way. All right, so I think you know that, right? We have every state has a capital city. Later this year, we're gonna memorize the capitals. Ours is in Tallahassee. Well, what happens there? Well, we send legislators there to make laws, just for Florida. You step over into the boundary, into Georgia, do you have to follow the law in Florida? In Georgia? No. Now what do you gotta follow? The laws in Georgia that they made at their capital in Atlanta. Right? Florida laws don't apply anywhere but Florida. And there's also an executive branch in Florida. But we don't call it the president. That's the governor, Ron DeSantis. His job is to enforce those laws that they made in Tallahassee. And believe it or not, in Florida we also have a Supreme Court. Not the US Supreme Court, there's actually a Florida Supreme Court. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's 5 judges on the Florida Supreme Court. And guess what they do? They interpret Florida law. Right? Every state has that. Beyond that, every single state has a constitution. There's a Florida Constitution. We're learning the US Constitution, right? But every state has their own state constitution. Now, back to Article 4. Article 4 kind of gives us some more specifics on how that national government and the state governments, how they get along and relate to each other. There's some specifics in there. So the very first clause in Article 4 is a famous clause. What are the first 4 words of Article 4? Chrissy? Full faith and credit. We call this the full faith and credit clause. Here's some examples of what that means. I happen to have a driver's license issued by the state of Florida. You don't, but I do. I get rub it in. You're not old enough. I got one. Issued by the state of Florida. Got my ugly picture of me on there. I passed all the tests, and I can drive my car in Florida, can't I? I have a license. I like to go to Georgia, way up at the very top of Georgia where the mountains are. I have a place up there I visit a lot. And when I do, I gotta drive through almost the whole state of Georgia. Do I need to get a Georgia driver's license? No. My Florida driver's license works just fine. I can drive in Georgia. I can drive in Hawaii, Colorado, Idaho. I could even drive in New Jersey, not sure why I'd wanna do that. But I could, couldn't I? All on my Florida driver's license. Why? Because the Constitution says that each state must give full faith and credit. Even though they might have different qualifications to drive. You might have to pass a driving test or a written test or an eye test, or you might have to be 16 in some states, 14 in other states. Every state has their own laws. Y'all wanna move to those states now, don't you? I think some of those out west, Chrissy. You gotta move to like Montana.
Drive on the left side.
No, not in America. No, that's in other countries, you drive on the wrong side.
Yeah,
But that driver's license will work, won't it? Full faith and credit. Another example, my wife grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in Pennsylvania. We met in Texas. And then like most couples, we got married in the bride's hometown, right? The way it usually works. So we got married in Minnesota. What you might not know, I know you know you need a driver's license to drive, but you might not know you can't get married legally without a marriage license. And it's governments that issue marriage licenses. So some little podunk county, Olmsted County, Minnesota, issued my marriage license. I never lived in Minnesota a day in my life, but that's where I got a marriage license. And then we moved to Texas. And then we moved to New Jersey, don't ask me why. And then eventually we moved to Florida. Am I still legally married? Yes, I am. Because each state of Florida has to give full faith and credit to the marriage license issued to me in Minnesota. Any questions on that part of the Article 4? It also says in Article 4 that Congress is in charge of admitting new states to the Union. Newsflash, we don't have 13 states anymore, do we? Yeah, we're up to 50, aren't we? Yeah, that means we've added some. Well, who did that? Congress. Well, why does Congress get to do it? Because it says so in Article 4. Eventually we got to 14, and then 15, and then we've been adding them ever since. We haven't added any for a while, though. 1959 is the last time. We added 2 states that year, Alaska and Hawaii. Hawaii 5-0, the 50th state. That's why we call it 5-0, because it's the 50th state. And we haven't added any since, but we could, right? Someday we could add another state. And it would be up to Congress to do that. Obviously, it doesn't say in the Constitution you have to be 50, any more than it says you have to have 13. Which leads me to another current event. Remember we talked about the balance of the Senate? Which party has the most senators right now? Republicans have 53, Democrats have 47. Well, there is some talk that some Democrats are saying if we get control, we're gonna add 2 states to the United States. We're gonna add Washington DC, make that a state. And we'd add Puerto Rico, make that a state. Then there'd be 52 states, and how many senators would each of those new states get? 2 each, that would make 4 new senators, right? So there'd be 104 instead of 100. And guess what? It just so happens that both Washington DC and Puerto Rico have a large majority of Democrats. So it'd be pretty likely that all 4 of those new senators would be Democrats. And that's why some of them are talking about doing that, so that they could enjoy a majority in the Senate for the foreseeable future. Now, there's nothing wrong with Congress adding states. Obviously, we've done that many times. We may do it again. But there would be something wrong with adding them just so you could get a majority in the Senate. That's not what the founders had in mind when they wrote Article 4. All right, finally in Article 4, the very end, Section 4, is guarantees to the states. All right, the U.S. government in the Constitution guarantees states protection. Like if, for some crazy reason, let's say Cuba invaded Florida. The U.S. government is not going to say, well, Florida, you're on your own. No. They promised to protect all states. Right, because we're all part of the country, it's a no-brainer, right? We're all part of the U.S., so the U.S. government will protect each state. It also guarantees that every state will have a Republican form of government. Remember what republic means. Our country is a republic, right? We know that, we learned that weeks ago. That means that all our leaders in Congress and the president, they're just people just like us, that we elected to serve us. And they have power, but their power is limited by what's written in the Constitution. It says what they can do and what they can't do. That's what a republic is. It's a beautiful thing. It works great. All right, well, not only is the United States a republic, but each of the 50 states is a republic. So our lawmakers in Tallahassee, our Governor DeSantis, they're just other people that live in Florida just like us, that we have given them the power over us. But their power is not unlimited, it's limited by the Florida Constitution. It says what they can and can't do. Every state is that way. Every state is a little mini republic inside the republic called the United States. Any questions on that? You know what's happening here? You guys are becoming experts on the Constitution little by little. You are on the verge of becoming great Americans. You're not quite there yet, though, because we're not done. All right, let's talk about Article 5. What's that about? Kasha? What is it about? Amending the Constitution. All right, here's something you need to know. You might even want to write it down. Amending means changing. It's that simple. To amend is to change. So if you add something to the Constitution, you've changed it, haven't you? That would be called an amendment. If you take something out of the Constitution, you changed it, didn't you? That would be called an amendment. Anytime you add or subtract, change the Constitution in any way, even one word, you changed it, that would require an amendment. So, Article 5, you see it's just one paragraph. What it describes is the process of how to amend the Constitution, how to change it. See, our founding fathers were pretty happy with the Constitution they wrote, but they were thinking, you know what, we might want to tweak this, we might want to change it in the future. So, let's write down the process of how to do that. So this is going to sound funny, but it's true. How to change the Constitution is you follow the Constitution. In other words, the Constitution tells us how to change the Constitution. It's the only way to change the Constitution because we are a nation of laws. And the Constitution tells you what has to happen in order to change the Constitution. Can't do it any other way. So there's the paragraph. I'll show you a chart. The chart's way easier to understand. It basically summarizes Article 5. Makes it kind of easy to understand. Amending the Constitution. What's that mean, amending? Changing. This is how to change the Constitution. 3 things have to happen. You need 2/3 of each House of Congress. That means you need 2/3 of the House of Representatives to agree to the change. And then you still need 2/3, not a majority, but 2/3 of the Senate to agree to the exact same change. And then you're not done. Then you still have to ratify it. Who remembers what the word ratifies means? Make it official, official approval. Still not part of the Constitution until it's ratified. And to get ratified, you need the state's input, not 2/3, 3/4, an even higher threshold in the states. You need 3/4 of the states to agree to the exact same change. And once you have that, now you've changed the Constitution. That's an amendment. Now, does that sound easy to you? No, that's a pretty tough thing to do, change the Constitution, isn't it? I mean, let's just think about what we already know about the Senate. There's 100 senators, 53 of them are Republicans, 47 are Democrats. 2/3 of the Senate would be 67. What are the chances you think we get 67 senators to agree on something? That would mean a bunch of Republicans and a bunch of Democrats would have to agree. Does that sound likely to you? Not very likely, does it? But if it did happen, well, that would be a pretty good indication that it's a pretty good idea, right? It would have a lot of widespread support. So if we could get 2/3 of the Senate, and we could get 2/3 of the House, we still got to jump this hurdle. We got to get 3/4 of the states. That means big states and small states would have to like it. States on the East Coast and West Coast and states in the Midwest would have to like it. And states dominated by big cities and states with a whole bunch of people that live in the country would all have to like it. 3/4 of them. Out of 50 states, that means 38 would have to like it. Only 12 could vote against it. Not very likely, is it? But if we did get all those Democrats and Republicans, all those big states and variety of states to agree, 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, 3/4 of the states, it would probably be a very good idea, a very popular idea. and then we could change the Constitution. So our founders did that on purpose. They said, let's make it so we can change this in case we want to in the future, but let's not make it easy. They don't want it to be impossible, because if it's impossible, well, what if we decide, we know we're a nation of laws, we gotta follow the Constitution, but what if there's no way to change it? We're stuck with it. No. So we made it a process. Here it is. But they didn't wanna make it easy, because if it's too easy, then we're constantly changing it. No one ever knows what the Constitution says, because it's always changing. So we made it difficult, but doable. Question: have we ever changed it? Yes or no? Have we ever changed the Constitution? Well, what do we call the Bill of Rights? What's the Bill of Rights? The first 10 what? Amendments. So yeah, we have, right? We added 10 major changes right away. In fact, let's back up. Think of some things we've learned. We know the Constitution was written in Philadelphia in 1787. That's when they wrote Article 5. When did we add the Bill of Rights? Check your Constitution. There'll be a year. When did we change the Constitution and add the Bill of Rights? Jessica? 1791, just 4 years after we wrote it. We gave a massive change, 10 changes, all in one big lump. We call it the Bill of Rights. So yeah, we've changed it. Were we done then? No. What year was Amendment 11? Jessica? 1795. What about Amendment 12? Anna?
Amendment 12 is 1804.
1804, and then so on. Every once in a while, we figure out something that we want to add to the Constitution. In one case, there was something we wanted to take out of the Constitution. All right, and we have changed it periodically throughout the years, but not very often. Remember, the Bill of Rights came in 1791, and the 200 whatever years since, we've only changed it 17 more times. When you think of hundreds of years, that's not very many changes, is it? When's the last time? That would be Amendment 27. When's the last time we changed the Constitution? Look at you guys becoming experts. Christian?
1992.
1992, you don't remember that, but I do. There have been several changes to the Constitution in my lifetime, but none since 1992. Could there be another change in the future? Yeah, pretty sure there will be a 28th Amendment someday, right? Who knows what that one will be? There's always ideas for amendments. Constantly, people come up with ideas. They think it should be in the Constitution. Sometimes we just settle it and have Congress make a law, and that's good enough. But other times we say, well, that's not good enough. Let's go ahead and put it right in the Constitution. But it has to be a really popular idea. Some ideas over the years, one that comes up constantly is to make a constitutional amendment to ban burning the American flag. Right? That's not illegal. That's part of our free speech rights. I love the flag. I have no use for people that burn it. I think it is a foolish way of protesting. But I also don't think we should put that in the Constitution. I don't think we should make being foolish illegal, right? Another idea that's come up frequently in the last, say, 8-10 years. Some people think we should make a marriage amendment to define marriage as between one man and one woman. I would support that, right? But 3 years ago, the Supreme Court said states can't make same-sex marriage illegal. They have to allow same-sex marriage. But if we did add the 25th Amendment, defining marriage as one man and one woman, then same-sex marriage would be unconstitutional, wouldn't it? I would support that one, but do you think we're gonna get 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, 3/4 of the states? No. No, probably not anytime soon, at least. There's always ideas for amendments, but very, very few get enough support to actually make it into the Constitution. Any questions on Article 5? Excuse me, Chrissy,
What if there was no constitution?
what is what?
What if there was no constitution?
If there was no Constitution, we would not be a constitutional republic. We wouldn't be a nation of laws. We would probably have a dictator, and we would be at the whims of whoever's in charge. Maybe it would be a military dictator, whoever controls the guns. Who knows, maybe it would be a royal dictator, whoever's born with royal blood. There's countries like that all over the world. But we're a constitutional republic. We follow the rule of law. One thing for sure, though, is we would not have freedom. Rule of law guarantees freedom. All right, let's move on to Article 6. Article 6 is just kind of general provisions. It's like the founders were like, all right, we're doing pretty good with the Constitution. Anything else we want to add? Yeah, a couple other things. Let's just throw them in Article 6. All right, let's add some last minute things. All right, for example, the Constitution in Article 6 has what we call the Supremacy Clause. Another famous clause. You've been learning a lot of famous clauses. All right, Supremacy Clause, Elastic Clause, Full Faith and Credit Clause, right? So here's a chart on the Supremacy Clause. Supremacy Clause, Article 6. The U.S. Constitution is, quote unquote, it says this in the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Supreme means highest, right? In other words, we agree as Americans that it's all about this Constitution right here. We all agree. That is the end all to all arguments. We are going to have conflicts. We're going to disagree. And we settle our disagreements because we all submit to the authority of the Constitution. It's the supreme law. Whatever it says goes. That's what being a nation of laws and not men means. All people are under the authority of the Constitution. If there's something in the Constitution we don't like, we can change it. Article 5 tells us how to do that. But in the meantime, we got to follow it as it is. Once we change it, then we follow it as it is then. Because that's now part of the Constitution. Any amendment is just as much a part of the Constitution as the original 7 articles, once they've been ratified. All right, but it's the supreme law. And look at this. If there's ever a conflict between a lower law and a higher one, who wins? The higher one. And the highest one of all is the Constitution. So we have different rungs on the ladder here. At the bottom is city and county laws. Like the city of Fort Myers can make laws that only apply in the city limits. Lee County can make laws, that's what the Lee County Commissioners do. They make laws that only are in effect in Lee County. If you go into Collier County, those things aren't laws, right? All right, and then above that, there's the state. State of Florida makes laws, don't they? In Tallahassee, that's what our state legislators do. They make laws that apply to Florida. Above that, we already mentioned every state has a constitution, right? There's a Florida state constitution. Above that, now we're into the blue, that's the national government. We have the U.S. Congress. Well, their whole job is to make laws, right? For all the states. And then above that is the supreme law, the United States Constitution. That's what we're studying right now. Why is the Constitution above everything else? Because the Constitution says so. Where? Article 6. There you go. We're a nation of laws. Constitution says. The Constitution's the supreme law. So here's how it works. Let's say Lee County makes a law. They can make any law they want. But watch this. the law that Lee County makes can't violate state law. It also can't violate the state constitution, Florida. It also can't violate any law that Congress made, and it also can't violate the US Constitution. Other than that, they can make any law they want. Right? The state of Florida can make any law they want, as long as it doesn't violate the Florida Constitution, as long as it doesn't conflict with a law that the US Congress already made, and as long as it doesn't violate the US Constitution. Then climbing the ladder. We have a Florida state constitution. We can put anything we want in that constitution, as long as it doesn't violate a law that the US Congress already made, and of course it can't be unconstitutional. And then finally, the US Congress make laws. That's what they do all day long. That's their job. Their primary function is make laws. They can make any law they want, unless it violates the US Constitution. Then they can't make that law. It would be unconstitutional. And who gets to determine whether any of these lower laws are unconstitutional or not? Who would decide that?
Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court, the judicial branch. They would interpret all these lower laws to see whether or not they violate the Constitution. There you go. Supremacy clause. Any questions on that? Pretty orderly, isn't it? We got it figured out. What else does Article 6 say? Well, let's see. It says that toward the end, basically all public officials, all people in the government have to take an oath. Like the president's oath, right? He promises to defend the Constitution. Well, guess what? Every congressman, every state legislator, every governor, every soldier in the military, every police officer, even every Lee County sheriff deputy, anyone in the government swears an oath to defend the Constitution. I took that oath many years ago. Right? Why do we require that? Because we're a nation of laws, and the supreme law is the Constitution. And if you're gonna serve in the government in any capacity, well, you gotta defend that Constitution. It also says in Article 6, the very end, the very